13th, 2023, and we would like to convene the meeting for the Single Family Design Board. We will start with roll call, please.
Here we go. Chair Claus,
Here.
Vice Chair Arkelian,
Here.
Board Member Anderson,
Here.
Board Member Klein,
Here.
Board Member Kufaidi.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Great. So we'd like to start with, I think, general business. I don't know if staff has anything first.
Chair Claus, just if you want to follow, we can do public comment first, or do you want to go down the list? Or
Yeah, the ticklers are great as I
yeah, it helps.
get my boots on.
We will guide you, and please don't be offended, but everybody will settle into a rhythm.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll open up public comment. This is for any item that's not on today's agenda. If there's anybody in the public or who is on the Zoom call that would like to raise their hand or make a comment on something that is pertinent to this board but not on today's agenda, now is your opportunity.
Great. And while we're just waiting for those on Zoom, Chair Claus, board members, we did receive 2 written correspondence that were considered general public comment, and they were distributed to the board prior to the hearing.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Gu, do you see any raised hands on Zoom?
Okay, at this time, I do not see any raised hands. Thank you.
Okay, this closes general public comment. Back to you.
Okay, and then, yeah, just for the record, there's no one out in the audience asking either, so we'll close public comment. And if I can get my little cheat sheet again, that'd be great. Okay, so we're on to ratifying minutes from prior hearings, and we'll start with the oldest one, which was December 19th. We had looked at that a couple meetings ago, and I think there were 2 questions about the accuracy of the minutes. One was item 3, and perhaps staff can, they were items 3 and 4. So if staff could just run us through any changes that were made to the minutes that we looked at previously.
Ms. Gu, can you review the changes, please?
Okay, for the item was approved for project design approval with continued indefinitely to consent review. The first item was corrected. Previously, it said the board strongly recommends that the applicant reduce the interstitial space between the first floor ceiling and the second floor finished floor to reduce the overall height and massing. That has since been corrected to the board strongly recommends that the applicant reduce the interstitial space between the first floor ceiling and the second floor finished floor by the minimum by the minimum of 6 inches to reduce the overall height of the northerly mass.
Okay.
Okay, so that particular one was corrected.
Okay.
The second and third, I believe, pretty much stayed the same. A was the proposed development is consistent with the scenic character of the city and will enhance the appearance of the neighborhood in use of extra materials, beach use of green screen and the hip roof. That has since been corrected too. The proposed development is consistent with the scenic character of the city and will enhance the appearance of the neighborhood, specifically in the area use of extra materials reflective of a beach quality project with exterior wood, rain screens, and hip roof consistent with the surrounding parcels.
Great.
Okay. And I believe that was the specific ones that were significantly changed. C might have been slightly altered. It used to be the proposed buildings and structures are designed with quality architecture, materials, and details. That has since been corrected to the southerly deck is consistent with the fabric of the neighborhood due to the original setbacks being 15 feet. And of course, the second sentence stayed the same.
Okay.
Okay, so that was the most change to the particular project. F also was slightly updated. It used to be the project generally complies with the Good Neighbor guidelines and SWIMP requirements regarding privacy and significant screening with landscaping and planters, noise, and lighting. That has since been updated to say the project generally complies with the neighborhood guidelines regarding privacy, landscaping, noise, and lighting, and complies with the stormwater management SWIMP requirements regarding privacy and significant fencing and screening on both the east and north side of the property, and the setback of the northerly property line, with additional landscaping and additional planters on the second floor to provide additional privacy screening. And that was the end of the significant changes on that particular item.
Okay, thank you. And then item 4, there was a question about, I believe, number 3 under the motion.
That particular one was stated originally, the board strongly suggests replacing the proposed stone veneer with Santa Barbara sandstone as an alternative. After reviewing the video of this particular item, it was repeated back by staff to the board and accepted as stated in the video. Thank you.
Okay, so if we can have a vote on ratification of these minutes, please, as they stand and corrected. Okay.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay, can we have roll call?
Here we go. Okay. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Orkilian,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
I was absent.
Okay. Abstains.
Abstain.
Okay. Board Member Klein
Yes.
and Board Member Gafidi.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll move on to the January 17th meeting minutes.
Yes. Item 1, 3208 Laurel Canyon Road was continued to date certain of January 30th to the full board with the following comments. Item 2, 101 Santa Cruz Boulevard. Received project design approval and will return to consent review. I received comments and findings. Item 3, 1269 Farello Road. Received project design approval, was continued indefinitely to full board for final approval with comments and findings.
I have a couple comments on this last item, on item 3, 1269 Farello Road. I believe that item 1 was a directive to the applicant that they shall reduce the floor plate height by 1 foot. If staff could please check that and confirm.
Will do.
Item 5, I think it can stand as it is. And item 7, there may have been a general note about diffused glass to this effect, but there was also a specific directive given to the applicant about particular openings and that those had to be diffused. I specifically remember at the stairwell on the west side. So if we can get that cleaned up.
Okay, just a point of clarification, it does say such as the entry stair that faces, looks like the east or west, but does that satisfy that comment, or does it need further review?
Let me just read through it here quietly for a second. The board. Proposed glazing. Yeah, I think that would address that.
Okay.
I think it's okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Is everybody comfortable
I
with
think
that?
that's clear.
Okay. And item 9, it seems like there would have been clarity around which window sill heights were being raised. So this is an awfully ambiguous comment here. Seems like that needs to be more specific, and we need to clarify for the applicant
Okay.
which window sill heights need to be raised.
We'll review the tape further.
So we'll bring this back to the board next time then? Okay.
Yes. Just want to make sure that's clear. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to the consent minutes for January 23rd.
Item A, 900 Los Alturas Road, was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer for return to consent with positive comments. Item B, 102 Jorgensen Lane, received final approval with the following comment. Item C, 506 Yankee Farm Road, received review after final approval with comments. That concludes the meeting minutes.
Okay, do I have a motion? Or does anybody have any comments?
I'll move.
I'll second. If we can have a roll call, please.
Here we go. Chair Claus,
Yes?
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
okay. Board Member Klein,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Gafidi, sorry.
Yes.
Motion passes, thank you.
Okay, and then we're moving on to the last set of meeting minutes, I believe, February 6th of this year.
Yes, item A, 3508 Madrona Drive, was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer for return to consent with the following comments. Item B, 221 Lee Drive, received project design approval and final approval with comments and findings. Item C, 507 Allen Road, received final approval with the following comment. That concludes the meeting minutes.
Would anybody like to make a motion? Or does anybody have any comments or amendments for this item?
No, I'll move.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, if we could have a roll call?
Here we go. Chair Claus,
Yes?
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson, Board Member Klein,
Yes.
and Board Member Gafidi.
I think abstain.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're on to general business announcements, requests by applicants for continuances, withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. I have a couple items, but maybe staff has some items first, or?
Yes,
Okay.
if I may, Chair Claus and board members, again, Ellen Kokinda, Design Review Supervisor. I just want to introduce a new face here. We have Ted Hamilton-Rolla. He is our new project planner in Design Review. I'm very excited. This is a position that has not been filled for many, many years, and so we have a chance to have additional staff help, be able to support our design review boards, have more trainings, all the things that we've promised you for a long time and that we haven't been able to fully deliver on. So I'm very happy to have Ted here, and you will see his face around a little bit more. Another announcement, and I know I emailed the board last week, but last week we launched our single-family design board survey. This is really to have a chance to hear from our customers, including both applicants, architects, designers, homeowners, anyone on an applicant team that has participated in any kind of single-family design board review in the last 3 years. And we're looking at 3 years because it's really when we changed a lot of our business practices, going from, paper plans to everything online, looking at, again, kind of where we are in this point in time. And I've shared this a while, but one of the things that came out of a 2020 report, it's called the Novak report, many of you are familiar with it, came out with a suggestion for process improvements for the land development team, which is across multiple city departments. And one idea was, how can we streamline single-family design board? And actually, a recommendation was to dissolve the SFDB, which is a really extreme recommendation, and staff did not agree with that. And so we are looking at a balance of Things have been added on your plate over time, so more and more projects have started to trigger design review, and we're really looking to peel back the onion and try to reduce the number of projects. And just to put this in perspective, looking at our mid-year numbers, Single-Family Design Board reviewed 161 projects. That's in comparison to ABR's 75 and HLC's 90. So you all haven't had a break. That's insane. And how can we responsibly pull that back and still honor this value-added process of design review and looking at single-family residences? So we're hearing from one side, but I just want to promise you it's acknowledgement of one side, the applicant side, and we're going to be looking to you, each and every one of you, to have conversations with to see how we might, how you view the world and how you review these meetings and what could be done better and what could be more streamlined, what would be helpful. So I'm really looking to you to, in the next couple of weeks, Ted will be reaching out to you and we'll be scheduling those conversations, collecting that information, and then synthesizing that with our survey results and trying to come up with, like, what are the themes that we're hearing, what could be helpful. And I'm really looking forward to a robust conversation at the City Council, because we will be leading with not only code amendments in order to reduce the number of design review triggers, but then also look at ways that we could expand administrative approvals from staff. So to reduce just the sheer number and the volume of projects that you review in order for you to, again, concentrate on the things that are most important. So I really look forward to having those conversations both with you all and then former SFDB board members who will also have things to share, and we'll be following up with additional conversations at the Land Development Team Oversight Subcommittee, which is a City Council subcommittee, and then subsequently when we actually have ordinance changes, we'd have to go through our normal process of ordinance committee and City Council review. So you will be in the loop and be a huge part of this process improvement, and just very much looking forward to this. And again, getting back to being able to support you in the ways that you've needed to be supported, and we've often yielded to keeping development projects moving and just kind of filling up your agendas, and that's problematic because it doesn't really give you a moment to breathe as a board. So I hope to have a little bit of reflection and look forward to that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And then I'm going to have one other announcement. A project that received project design approval at 101 Santa Cruz was appealed by a neighbor, and there's City Council will be setting a date for that appeal. It'll likely be in April, but we are working with the appellant and the architect and the property owner to hopefully come up with maybe some kind of design solution so we could avoid a City Council appeal. So, but I can't promise that, but that's our intention, is to try to work that out.
Okay. So just to summarize pending appeals, we have Edgewater, we have Vista Del Mar, I think it was,
That's correct.
and Santa Cruz. Are those the three that are pending? Is there
Chair
one
Kowalski,
missing?
we also have 1269 Farello Road scheduled for 4/11.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So a couple items that I had, we're just finding, so I know staff is, we're all trying to drink from a fire hose here. And so we're constantly seeing amendments to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance locally as a result of changes on a state level being passed down to municipalities. And so I have asked of Ms. Kokinda, and it sounds like it might fall to you, Mr. Hamilton, but if we could schedule some time, I guess I'm formally requesting that now, to schedule some time for a training and sort of open dialogue session just for our board. And I know it means we all have to meet one more time. The intent is that we can all sit in a room and just, number one, have some training in terms of Brown Act items, things of that nature that we need to go through, as well as to review our guidelines and just have discussions about those. So we're not trying to rewrite the guidelines, we're not trying to argue about the guidelines, we're just trying to have a discussion, okay, when we're talking about mass, what are we talking about in our guidelines? And maybe what was the intent as it was originally drafted? And to get some clarity there, because I think as a board, it would be really helpful for us if we understood the intent behind this as they were drafted, as opposed to us coming to this 10 or 15 years after the fact and attempting to interpret it ourselves. I think if we had some consensus on the board, it would help us all serve our applicants better. So that's one thing that I wanted to request. It would be very helpful at that session if we did have one or more drafters of the guidelines there. So if there were people who, I think on the inside cover of our guidelines, it acknowledges some of the people who were involved in the drafting of it. If there's any way to get one or two of them in the room, I think that would be super helpful. It might also be an opportunity for us to provide some of the feedback that you're asking for in regards to the survey and what we're getting at different levels of review, i.e. the required minimum items for a conceptual review versus a PDA versus a final. Because in some cases, I think we're getting too much, and in some cases, I think we're not getting enough information at different stage gates, and I think that's really important for us to start talking about, because I think it would help us streamline the process in terms of getting projects through a little bit better. And then, so I just want to acknowledge, I think staff is working on trying to align some portions of our current ordinance as they relate to the change in size or quorum for our board. I think there was something that I noticed in regards to a supermajority that needed to be brought into alignment, and I just wanted to touch base on that and make sure that that's in the works.
Yes, so Chair Claus, through you to the rest of the board, what Chair Claus is referring to is we have our single-family design guidelines, and within that, if an applicant wishes to exceed 100% of their FAR, of their required FAR, I should say, then it requires a modification. And in order to get that, you would need a 5-person vote. That's unanimous, which is kind of hard to accomplish. It was intended, talk about intentions, it was intended to be a supermajority, but that was really when the board was a 7-member board. And so I think we've had a couple of projects that it doesn't happen very often, but I think we have to assume that it will at some point. And so that would be something that we would address in a guideline update. And as part of the process improvements, we would address and correct that. To keep it, I think the intention would still likely be a supermajority, but a supermajority is different when there's 5.
Exactly, okay. Those were the only items that I had. Does anybody else have any general business items or requests of staff or announcements?
I will just follow up, Chair Claus, and say that we are so happy to schedule that training and a conversation for you all. There's 2 ways we could do that. It could be a separate meeting, or we could take up a good chunk of your regular meeting. And if there's a lighter day, we can see how many projects. I mean, we were able to cancel the last meeting, which is kind of a phenomenon. But we'll be conscious of everybody's time and try to figure out what might work the best and can propose some solutions and dates. Secondly, with the accessory dwelling unit conversation, you brought that up. We will have, staff are going to get their training next Friday. So once staff are trained, we can follow up with a separate discussion item at one of your regular hearings for a training on that. And I think that wouldn't take too long, and it'll kind of help ground you in understanding when an ADU project comes before you, you understand why it triggered design review, like why is it going through discretionary review. And then what aspects do you have purview over? So you'll kind of understand the new regulations with that. We're happy to
Okay.
do that.
Great. Okay, that all sounds good.
Chair Koloss, just one last announcement. So per our meeting, Ellen and I and Chair Koloss met and discussed the consent reviewer agenda schedule. So Heidi Rydell, who manages the consent calendar, did send out an email today to all board members just outlining what we've come up with as far as consent coverage goes. I understand Chair Koloss has volunteered to cover 2 meetings a month, and then alternating weeks, we plotted Anderson and R. Killian. So hopefully that works out with your schedules, or can trade amongst yourselves. The idea is that we will be relieving Board Member Klein and bringing her in for any landscape-heavy projects. And our hope is that Board Member Graffiti can start to shadow, and once, a little more comfortable, can also jump in at consent review.
And I can just add one thing to that. It's really, what we were hearing. And I think that under previous times, it's been a lot easier to schedule someone out for one chunk of time for, a quarter. And, when you have everybody's a working professional here, and that makes it a lot harder to kind of take on that amount of time. And we recognize, I can't change when consent happens very easily. We can look into it, but it's really difficult to, just how it's set up. So we are trying to come up with something that wouldn't burden one person too heavily in any particular time frame. So we've got a chunk of a calendar, and then we'll come back and revisit, and it would be great to get your feedback on that. And yes, and a huge appreciation for Board Member Klein, who sat through pretty much every single one last year. and
She's
for
taking
a
the
lot
brunt
longer.
for like a year and a half, That's great. I personally haven't had a chance to look at the proposed schedule, but would it be possible for staff to send all of the board members an email that has all the board members' contacts? Because a lot of times that's just done, I think, through a BCing mechanism. And if we're going to have to trade or swap days, that would facilitate that. That'd be
Yes,
helpful.
Of course, will do.
Okay, great. And yeah, the hope is that Ms. Graffiti, we can bring you into the fold in terms of consent in another 3 months or something, once you feel like you've gotten your sea legs on and everything. So happy to do it. Okay, great. Anything else in terms of general business or announcements?
Chair Koloss, item number 2, located at 342 Palisades Drive, has been postponed indefinitely at the applicant's request.
Okay.
So it won't be heard today.
Okay, and item, Mr. Arakelian has advised me that he'll have to step down for item 1 due to a conflict. Okay. Okay, so I think we are on to the actual agenda. So item 1 is 229 San Clemente Street. If we have an applicant present representing the project. I'll go ahead and read this into the record, and then we'll ask you to introduce yourselves and the project. Okay, so this project is located at 229 San Clemente Street. This is an E3 SD3 zone, and the proposal is to construct additions to an existing 1,010 square foot single-family or single-unit residence comprised of a 322 square foot first floor addition and a 521 square foot second floor addition. The project will provide a 2-car tandem garage and also includes a new standing seam metal roof, a pool and hot tub, an air conditioning unit, and minor driveway grading and installation of permeable pavers. The proposed total of 2,131 square feet of development on a 6,969 square foot lot amounts to 73% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio. The project is located in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone, and we are being asked to review this for concept at this time. No final appealable decision can take place at this hearing. No neighborhood preservation findings will be required when the project is reviewed for project design approval. If you can, please introduce yourself and run us through your project. That'd be
Great. So I'm Dylan Henderson, Salt Architecture.
And I'm Kevin Capon.
And we were engaged with a client. They actually had a previous design on this, and due to lots of different constraints, construction cost being one of them, we sort of have simplified the design. And so this is now a remodel. Originally, it was proposed as a tear down and rebuild. And so significant portion of the existing footprint remains the same. I'll just go through very quickly. We have an addition of 228.5 square feet at the proposed rear of house, which I'll show you in floor plan. We have 45.5 square feet proposed at the front of the house. And then we have 521 square feet on the second level. And so, Kev, if you can go to the existing floor plan, if we have that. Yeah. So A 2.0 is on the screen, and this is the existing floor plan. It has a single-car garage, kitchen sort of centrally located, and then 3 bedrooms with 2 baths. So if you go to the proposed floor plan, please. So the hatched regions, which are a little bit hard to see on the screen here, but Kevin, maybe you could, yeah, that's awesome. You can zoom in like that. That's new. Okay, so at the front of the house here, just south of master bed on the page, that's the new addition at the front of the house. And then at the rear of the house, that's the 45 square feet. And at the rear of the house, this is the 228 square feet where we're going back toward the yard. And so the garage right now, I noted, was a single-car garage. We're going to a tandem garage configuration in order to comply with the 2-car parking. We've already worked that out with Michelle Bedard with Transportation, and they are in support of the parking waiver. So we are supplying a second parking space. Go to site plan, please. So at the rear of the house, we're proposing a pool, which will be part of the application, and that is going in the open yard area. And then the existing sort of landscaping off to the west side of this, or north side of this, sorry, will remain. So there's an avocado tree there and sort of a pretty backyard. If you go back to floor plan, actually, I should have stayed there, but I want to just talk through the second level. So the existing garage is obviously single story, and so above the garage we're adding, and the back of the house, we're adding a second story. This family has a couple of kids who are coming into their teenage years. We're going to give them both ensuite baths with, closets and built-ins and things like that above the existing garage footprint. And so demonstrably the footprint of the house is not changing. We have one second-story addition only going on the south side of the house. If you go to the driveway, I'll turn it over to you, and you can talk about grade and elevation.
Yeah, so part of what our clients wanted to do was to increase the usability of the driveway. So we're going to propose lowering the finished floor elevation of the garage by 11 inches. And that gets our slope down from the current 16% in the driveway down to a little over 10%, 11%. And that's again, just so that they were having trouble, are currently having trouble with the steepness of the driveway. And you touched on all the other logistical things that I want to talk about, but the current front face of the garage is in the front setback, and so we are proposing to move that wall. It's 14 inches back toward out of the front setback, and that's the only other thing.
Yeah, so I think, and then we're doing permeable pavers for the whole driveway, and currently that's all concrete. And so really what we're trying to do is bring this house very much into compliance by adding the second parking getting ourselves compliant with the front yard setback, and then, trying to kind of clean up what was already a sort of a pre-existing condition. So if you go to the elevations, we'll talk through materials, or actually, if we go to a materials sheet, 3. So the proposed exterior materials, and then we'll go to the elevations to point that out, is we're going with a standing seam metal roof. We have on the second level, we're doing a board and bat painted off-white. That Benjamin Moore Horizon White is the top color. Bronze-clad, aluminum-clad windows and doors on the exterior. Those are the proposed lighting fixtures that we have as of now, and then a smooth Santa Barbara stucco for the base level of the house. And then that's the proposed entry door, not necessarily the side lights, but the proposed entry door. If we go to the elevations, we can take a look at that. So very much trying to stay in the sort of the vein of, the Mesa. This is a cute little beach community, and I feel that these materials and the layout of this house really sort of fits the neighborhood. We're not going for a full two-story house, which is quite a few of the projects that are being done on the Mesa now are doing that. And so we definitely wanted to keep the mass and scale down and keep that away from the north property lines for the solar access and all of those things. So just trying to be extremely compliant with this and make everybody in the neighborhood happy as well. And so board and bat on the second level with more of a solid foundation material of the smooth plaster on the ground level. And, just a very simple, clean architectural style here. So, and I think we're accomplishing what would fit very nicely on the Mesa. We have some existing photos of the house, if you'd like to pass these around, just to get context.
We have them.
Is that both
We have
of
them
those?
here as well, but I think it might be a little easier to see.
Yeah.
I'll pass these around, but if you wouldn't mind doing it on the screen just for record purposes, that
Definitely.
would be helpful.
Sure. Do we want to walk through the photos here that we have?
That would be great.
So, photo number 1 here, this is the proposed project site. This photo here is directly across the street, down below it. This is the adjacent property to the left pictured and, to the south, sorry, and adjacent property to the north on the right. 2 doors to the north here pictured and 3 doors to the north just on the same side of the street. Front elevation of the existing residence with that single-story garage. This is kind of a photo of the entry and the northern side yard, rear elevation, and what you can see of the side yard to the south. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that complete your presentation?
Yes, it does, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to ask if there's anybody in the audience or remotely. I'll just turn it over to staff for public comment.
Sure, Chair Kloss. So at this time, for those attending on Zoom, and if you wish to make oral public comment on this item, you can do so by selecting the raise your hand icon. Once staff calls on you, you can unmute yourself. So while we're waiting for those on Zoom, and I'm seeing none in the audience, we also have not received any written correspondence on this item. Ms. Gu, do you see any raised hands on Zoom?
At this time, I do not see any raised hands on Zoom for this item. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we would close public comment for this item. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, we didn't receive any speaker slips.
Nope.
Right, okay. And just to confirm, Mr. Arakelian has stepped down, but we don't need to read a statement because he's not presenting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to open it up to the board for any questions that they might have of the applicant. I'm going to do this a little bit differently than we have been doing this the last year. I am not going to be calling on individual members of the board in any specific order for questions. I'm just going to open it up for anybody who feels compelled to ask a question, you guys can all sort of duke it out amongst yourselves and politely find an order to ask the applicant whatever you'd like to ask them in. I just think that will be a little bit more equitable and easier way to do it. That way, nobody feels like they're on the spot first time. So it's open to anybody who's got a question for the applicants.
I'd like to state that I have no questions.
That's helpful. Thank you very much, Ms. Klein. Anybody else?
I have some questions.
Great.
Can you go over, I'm jumping in, existing house plate heights and proposed plate heights with us? That's my first.
Sure. Do we have section cuts, or actually zoom in right there,
Which
lower right corner? Yeah, so the existing plate heights at the house are 8 feet, and we're proposing to raise the plate by a foot in order to get all of our roof lines to work. And so we've got a 9-foot plate at the front of house with an 8.0 door entering, and the house existing is an 8-foot plate, and we have a 9-foot plate. And then the second story is new, obviously, so
So what's the plate height of the second story?
8 feet,
8 feet?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Then can you walk us, do you have roof plans? You have wood-
Yes.
And you're pulling off the roof, I think, of the existing house, and I'm not sure you went over that with us.
Sure, so this is the proposed roof plan that you see here. So it's a combination of 6 12-pitch roofs. We have a shed dormer at the back of 2 12. And then, say that, yeah, you can, if you
Oh, yeah,
can.
that's kind of broken up too, but you're not really showing it there, but,
What's that? I'm not showing what.
well, the broken step dormer in the back, is that
Well,
defined?
We are, yeah. So, Kevin, you can put your cursor right on the line of the break of the dormer. It's a 2 12, so a 5 12 comes down and it breaks to a 2 12 right there at that line. Right,
Oh,
basically just north of grid line 2. Or sorry, south of grid line 2 on the page.
Right, and the two little end pieces, I see the lines there, they're very light on the sides.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I was talking about, but.
Exactly. Yep. Then we have a 2 12 shed coming to join kind of the 6 12 at the front to the 6 12 on the side. So we're matching gables at front of house with second story and the roof over the master bedroom, connected by a shed. And then if you go to the existing roof plan, we have that.
We don't have the existing roof plan, but I can take us to the existing site plan.
Sure.
Well, you're pulling the whole roof off, right? The
Yeah.
first floor, so
Yep,
yeah,
we're
it's
pulling
not
the roof
really,
off.
and
That's correct.
not really
So-
super relevant.
On the right-hand side of the
To me.
screen, you can see it's just a series of connected hips.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So we're taking that off.
And this is the garage here is just a flat roof here.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. And then the plaster on the first floor and architectural style versus the board and bat on the second floor. More reasoning behind the different break-in materials.
Sure. So what I like to do and what I think actually looks very nice on these types of houses that you provide a more solid base material. So in traditional architecture, that would have been stone, for instance, or concrete as the base. And then you would go to lighter materials up above. So in this case, sort of emulating that first level of a more solid masonry foundation that then gets a smooth stucco coat over it, and then breaking to a lighter weight material, which would be wood with a wood finish above. And it tends to just look really beautiful that way, because you're more solid below with lighter above. In ancient architecture is tripartite construction, where you'd have 3 levels, where then you would be even lighter above that. But we don't do that much anymore on single-family residences. So that's the concept behind that. We've done it and it has been quite successful. It really does look beautiful.
Then I have in my notes from my earlier reviews, have in my notes, is the second floor over the garage, is that stepped back a little bit? Can you
If you
talk
go
to me
to
about that, or it's not really shown too well in the rendering?
It's the other side.
Oh, there's,
Yeah, so the second level to the right of grid line 4, you can see how it's stepped back, and then the entry roof comes and breaks that elevation on the right-hand side where you see the 10 3/4 dimension. So that is a flat, essentially a flat roof over the garage, stepping back the second story from the front facade so that you break up that vertical plane at the street.
by approximately a foot?
Yeah, I can dimension that for you, but yes, if that's 1 foot 4 3/4 below, I'm probably very close to that. I think I'm 18 inches.
Okay. And then the second story and the setbacks along that side, can you go over that real quick? Sorry.
The second story in the setback, walk me through that. Yeah, interior setback on the left-hand side is clear of the roof eave line. Is that the question?
Sorry, no, maybe if you went to the site plan or the floor plan.
Okay.
I'm trying to, I mean, it's right on the setback, the second story.
The face
Whatever the
of-
minimum is what I'm,
The face of the garage is right on the setback. The second story is setback.
in the front.
Yeah, it's setback. The front setback is right above grid line A and C there, and you can see the second story is setback from front line. But we're pretty close on the garage just because we're trying to comply with we're complying with what should have been done originally, right? Because it's actually inside that setback now at the front of the garage. But the second level is setback from front setback by a good chunk.
But the interior or the side adjacent to the neighbor is at the minimum setback of 6 feet. What is that?
I think, I'm going to
Right.
try to mediate here for a second.
no, thanks.
I think that Ms. Anderson is trying to understand the relationship of the sidewall of the home, sidewall of the garage and the new second floor relative to property line at that location.
Okay.
And perhaps we could kill two birds with one stone, and you might also address how you're dealing with solar ordinance there.
Sure. Okay. So if you go to site plan.
Okay.
And zoom in on that.
On this corner.
So the interior setback is the dashed line there. It's a 6-foot interior setback line. And we're clear of it on the side. We're clear of eave line and side of building.
Right.
Yes. So we're clear of that. And then on the solar, if you go to the elevations, Kevin.
Yeah. So these are the northerly property lines over here.
Yeah, we actually have 2 north property lines, right?
Yeah.
That's right, because you're on the, I'll call it the westerly side of the street, right? Okay.
Yeah, so we can see that in the elevations here. Here's one diagram here and on the other elevation. So which would you like to go over?
Just zoom into the upper left corner, please. Okay, so the code here is you come off northerly property line, we're west side of the street, so we actually have 2 northerly property lines. You come up 12 feet, you take a 30-degree angle, and you project that angle clear, and we are clear on this property line. If you go to the lower right corner, Kev. Same thing, we go up 12 feet, we project a line at 30 degrees, and we project it out, and we are clear on this property line. So we have 2 norths. So compliant there. And then stay there for a sec if you go into grid line A.
On this south elevation?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the line to the left, just to stay on this interior setback question, that line, interior setback line, is 6 feet in from property line, and our second story and our garage is clear of the interior setback line. So we are compliant in that regard.
One more, sorry. I know you guys are going to pick. Neighbors, have you discussed and shown the plans, especially with the adjacent neighbor of the two-story?
So I know that the owner is friends with them. They had a previous proposal for a two-story house in its entirety, 2 stories up above. And so I have not had a conversation with that neighbor, but this is something like the 3rd year that they've been sort of designing around on this. And so they have been discussing with their neighbors. And I would imagine their neighbor is happy that the scale of the project has been reduced from what it was, because it was a significant project previously. So I have not talked to him, but I also haven't heard anything negative. Usually we hear negative things if somebody hasn't been talked to. So I feel okay about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My question is, I know we've been talking about the second story element, and I noticed it's flush completely with the first story. Did you consider any other ways to potentially break up the second story kind of massing, or can you speak to that?
Sure. So we did set back the second story from the front elevation and broke it with a roof line in order to bring that front facade back. So we sort of reduce the overall verticality of that wall when perceived from the street. This house is up several feet. It's 5.5 feet from the sidewalk level. Is that right? We up 5.5? Yeah, so 5.5 feet up. And so everything is sort of projected up. So when you pull that second story back, it really helps to decrease that overall mass and scale.
Yeah, and I guess I should be more specific on the west side of the home, not from the front viewpoint. Or I
Okay.
guess both, but.
Yeah, so because we are following the existing footprint of the house, we are trying to, this is a tight lot, right? And so we're trying to keep that second story very much away from north property lines in order to comply with solar access and fit those 2 bedrooms. And just from a pure square footage standpoint, it felt right just to stack that and have it be something that was usable. I think that the issue is when you start to step it back and do all sorts of things on something as small as this, you get a really difficult and convoluted structural diagram for what you're trying to do with the house. And so I think it was a balance between let's give a bit at the front elevation and not try and sort of maximize that from a mass and scale standpoint, and then let's try and get you stacked so that structurally we're simple, so we don't cost crazy amounts with structural steel and stuff to make it happen, but also to give them the square footage that they need. I think it's very, I think it's great that they're actually looking at this as a remodel. I think that there's a lot of these houses that just get scraped on the mesa. And there's a lot of character to these old cottages, you know, these 1,200, 1,400 square foot cottages. And I think we're going to try and do our very best to keep the intent of that, especially on this right side of the house. But, you know, the balance of that is that we're trying to also keep a second story available for them and give them the square footage that they need without overwhelming the rest of the house with that, right? Because if we had to narrow that down and started to step that entirely, we'd end up with a much larger second story addition to the right, which would then start to detract from sort of that cottage element that we're trying to keep. Yeah.
That's it, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I have a couple questions. Do you know what the existing pitch of your roof is on the home?
I believe it's 412.
Is there a reason that you're going to the 6 and 12 as opposed to maintaining the 4 and 12?
We need some head height interior to the house. Right now, it's all a flat plate at 8 feet, and it's all flat ceilings. When you walk in, it just is one continuous level, sort of track home style. And so we're trying to get some loft and some vault into these rooms to make it feel a little larger, because these rooms are really quite small. So the primary bedroom, for instance, is sort of, 12 by 14. And so in order to make that feel a little bit more grand, I would say, we're going to be able to vault those ceilings, especially in the kitchen at the back. And so that's the impetus for that. We're trying to keep, again, keeping this scale down as tight as we can. But when you go to a 4, you lose that vault on the interior. You really lose the space that you'd hope to gain. And I think a 6 really helps with that. I also think a 612 visually just really speaks to this kind of cottage feel. And I like a 612, and it gives you more space inside. So, yeah.
Do you know what the pitch is on most of, or could you just guess what the pitch would be for most of the surrounding residences?
Can I see those photos? That packet, yeah, thanks. I can just take a look. Yeah.
And then maybe while you're looking for that, I can pose another question. And
Sure.
do you know what the, I'll call it the absolute ridge height is of the existing home? So do you have an actual like elevation, like a surveyed elevation of the ridge line?
Yeah, we shot that. Yeah. Yeah, so in looking at these, I mean, these are kind of chopped up roofs, but I would imagine that that's probably a 5 and 12, and that's probably more of a 3 and 12 spread over a very wide gable, which I don't find that attractive. And then these guys, these roofs really aren't that beautiful, right? So that's your comparative. So that's probably a 4.5 or 5, 4 and 12. And then this guy back here looks like it has a steeper roof here and then goes to, a lot of these houses just end up with a really wide gable and then they just span the whole thing and go with a flat elevation on the front and throw 2 windows in it, because that's how they used to track build. And these were track homes, right?
Yeah.
And so I think bringing a little of that character in is important.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd want to match that, to be honest. I don't think I want to tie into that.
Okay. And then while is it Henderson?
No, that's
I'm
me.
forgetting, I'm
That's
sorry.
Capone.
Okay, Mr. Kaplan, I'm sorry.
The ridge elevation is 106.6 feet. That's the highest.
Okay, and then can you tell me what the resulting ridge line is on both the first and the second story masses as proposed?
First, down here on the first story, we have the 107, and then on the second story, 115.7 feet.
115.7?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I look at the floor plan for a moment, please? First floor plan?
The proposed, correct?
Yes, please. Okay, I was just taking a look. Okay, so you have a couple steps up from the garage, within the garage, in order to gain interior access
Yes.
because of that 1-foot drop that you're, okay.
Yeah, because right now, the driveway is so steep that you sort of bottom out the car as you roll into the garage, and so we need to get rid of that.
Yeah, it's relatively steep. I noticed that today when I drove by. Okay, those are the only questions I have. If nobody has any questions, then we will close the question period and comments. Anybody want to jump in on comments?
I'll go for it. Overall, I think it's an improvement to the site and the neighborhood. Like you said, you're kind of cleaning it up, bringing it into compliance. I think you're also making it more sustainable. You're adding the permeable pavers. The FAR is well within the suggested guideline as well. And I think it is compatible with the neighborhood as far as materials and colors and massing. And I don't see any neighborhood privacy issues. It looks like there is existing hedges on both sides.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I'll go. Yeah, I definitely think it's compatible with the neighborhood. I would add the pictures in the set. The part I'm struggling with is compatible with the adjacent neighbor's side, and back. It's just so wonderful to have the street silhouettes and give us a bigger picture of what's going on with the neighbors, adjacent and scale. The step back of that second story on the front, I don't think it's significant enough to really make the impact I think that you're going for. So I would like to see it more than 1 foot, or approximately, 3 feet, something like that. I don't typically like to see the balance for me on one side, but I understand cost and scope as well. So I'm kind of struggling with that because it drives me nuts to see 2 stories over the garages, just generally, and not balanced or step back. And you got the front thing going on, so I'm going with it. I still, the neighborhood compatibility and then talking to the neighbors and talking about the windows on that 2-story elevation. I know they're all raised up, but having that, conversation to make sure that nothing comes up definitely needs to happen. So, yeah, and materials, I understand your reasoning. I struggle with the plaster on the first floor and the board and bat on the second. I mean, I understand the cottage look you're going for and the philosophy around that. To me, the break at the floor line maybe doesn't make as much sense as lower, or a transition that is more defined. I don't know. It feels discongruent to me, style-wise. Those are my comments.
Ms. Graffitti, do you have anything?
Sure, I don't think I have anything new per se, but would agree. I think generally the style of the home, the mass bulk and scale, staying within, 73% FAR is all within, compatibility with the neighborhood. I drove the street, lots of 2 stories, lots of remodels or more contemporary style homes, standing seam roof, gray palette, all of that seemed very on par with the immediate street and neighborhood. Similar comment on just preference to second story and how you've designed, but I appreciate you walking us through like what went through, and also understand budget constraints and just reality of architecture on the Mesa. I believe that's all. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. I guess my comments are that I did drive by here, and I think that the 2-story residence that you're illustrating in your package of surrounding homes, I think that's about 2 or 3 houses up on the side of the street, but that the majority of the houses in the immediate neighborhood were single-story. So in my mind, height is kind of one of the biggest concerns when we're looking at something that's going to be the 2-story in the middle of sort of the 1-story C, so to speak, which is why I was asking the questions about roof pitches and things of that nature. The change in pitch doesn't bother me so much. I mean, we're talking about a 9-inch difference on a ridgeline for the first floor. I think that regrading the driveway is successful, and I think that really helps to sort of help pull down the second floor. I didn't ask, and I don't know whether the plate height at the garage is also 9 feet, or if that's remaining 8 feet, and that's allowing you to keep that low. Is that, okay. So I think that's a positive thing. I did observe that the majority of the roofs in this neighborhood are like an asphalt shake or shingle, as opposed to the standing metal seam. I think there's one standing seam metal home. That looks like one that has undergone a pretty extensive remodel, maybe. So my propensity would be to want to see an asphalt shingle roof as opposed to a standing seam on this. I concur with Ms. Anderson's comments about considering where the break is between materials. I think that's more of a development issue as you work through the project. I mean, we're just at a conceptual stage right now. I don't know whether you need, like a strong band around it or whether it needs to be pulled down. I don't think that or what you were referring to as the flat element that is being used for the transition in the step back, I don't find that to be successful. I think that needs a slope to it, or I think it needs to be treated in some different way. I think that's going to look a little bit awkward. But generally speaking, I think that the massing and the heights are reasonable for the neighborhood. And clearly the FAR is acceptable. So I don't know if anybody wants to try to make a motion here and provide some comments. I would encourage whoever makes the motion that if there's strong feelings about a particular item, that they use directive language rather than flexible language, so that the applicant has clear direction from us. So I'm going to open it up. Does anybody have a motion? I'm looking at you, Ms. Anderson.
Okay, so we're making a motion to approve concept with the following revisions.
Let's get staff clarification on that. Can we make an actual motion, or can we only provide comments at this time?
Thanks. So Chair Kloss, board members, I would suggest a motion to provide comments for the project, motion for the project to continue back to the full board for further review.
Thank you.
So the motion is to continue back to the board for further review, but in concept, or can we move to design?
We'll have to see. The project has been deemed complete, so it's okay for the board to just continue the project to the full board with the following comments, and then list the comments out.
So I think the answer is return it to
We'll
the board,
see, yeah.
to the full board for conceptual approval, and if you feel comfortable, PDA.
Chair Kloss, board members, we don't need a conceptual approval. We just provide conceptual comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's the clarification we needed.
Okay. So, yes, the comments are as followed. Add the pictures into your set, your drawing set. I would recommend street silhouettes, some additional information on neighborhood compatibility, and also if you can communicate with the adjacent neighbors with their acceptance of your property, the side-to-side, and I would say they're at least, the two-story side, but I always look at the rear as well. Yeah, and then study further. Yeah, here's the one that needs to be more direct. The 1 foot second-story setback. Needs to be, no, we need to just give a directive. It needs to be more than the 1 foot, basically, in my opinion.
Do you have a minimum thought on what that dimension
Oh,
should at least meet?
3. I mean, you've got a step back going right there at the front door. What's that? Right. Well, right, there could be a different element yeah, I don't know how to make the motion to where it's going to work. I mean, it's not a suggestion.
Why don't you go ahead and just make your motion, Ms. Anderson?
Okay.
With a specific dimension, and then the board will consider that and perhaps amend the dimension that you provide.
Okay, I would recommend stepping the second-story addition back 3 feet or to that existing entry door. And I believe, the project will enhance the appearance of the neighborhood. Scale, size, and bulk are all compatible. And that's my motion. Sorry, it's very rough. I'm like not on the motion.
That's okay. This is one of the reasons that we're requesting some training from staff so that we can all. So I'm going to second the motion in an effort to move things on, and I'm going to ask the maker of the motion if it's acceptable to make the following amendments. So the language in regards to the front, the step back at the second floor of the front elevation would be a minimum of 2 feet from the lower first floor portion of that. That's a shall statement. It shall be a minimum of 2 feet. That the applicant shall study the relationship of the board and bat to the plaster and return at the next board meeting with those studies and their preferred resolution to the location of the change in materials, as well as details when it's appropriate, and that the applicant strongly consider using asphalt shingles or shakes in lieu of the standing seam metal roof in support of neighborhood compatibility. Other than that, all of the other items provided by Ms. Anderson are acceptable. Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes, thank you for picking up the plaster, board and bat.
Okay, great. So we have a motion on the table. If we could take a roll call, please.
Here we go. Chair Claus,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Klein,
Yes.
and Board Member Gafidi.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
And can I ask one question? Am I allowed to do that? Okay. And this is just for my edification on this, is that usually when we have something like you need to reduce the second story and you need to step it back 2 feet or 3 feet, it follows with per design regulation, SP, da-da-da-da-da-da, and we're tying back to some level of rigor within the design code. So I guess I would just ask that when that motion gets made, that it ties it back to a design regulation that the city has in place, because otherwise we end up with a huge level of subjectivity, right? Where it's 3 feet, it's 2 feet, it's 18 inches. And so that would be helpful for us as applicants to be able to go back to our client and say, per design regulation X, Y, and Z, we're being required to do this, as opposed to subjectively the board felt this way about the project. Because some clients have a very distinct reason as to why they want something, and they're the ones paying for it. So it gets hard for us to just say, yeah, it's felt a little loose, and that's hard for us.
I completely understand that, and we'll work with staff to cite the,
That would
The
be great.
two-story design concepts in the
Yeah.
guidelines.
So.
Talks about step back.
I totally agree,
Yeah.
but put that in the motion.
We will cite that in the motion.
That would be
We'll
awesome.
provide that to staff. Can you,
Okay.
do you have a page number or a section that you can provide to staff right now, Ms. Anderson?
Yeah. 39 TS, two-story design concepts is a section.
Okay,
So-
that can be referenced.
Confirmed.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's no minimum dimension with that, correct? With that setback. So I think what he's saying is, I understand you want to give him clear direction, but I also would think that you want to give some flexibility because there isn't an actual number there. So maybe it should be shall study in the motion, just to give that, it's still concept. We want to like study it.
I think we have given them flexibility. We've simply given them a minimum. We haven't given them a maximum, and we haven't given you a definitive.
Got it.
We've
I
given you a
think-
minimum.
I think that was needed clarity for me.
Okay,
So minimum.
great.
Okay.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate it.
thank you for your
Yeah.
feedback.
Thank you very much.
We're trying to get,
Yeah, I get, no, I get it. I
we're
get it.
a
It's-
new board, and we're all trying to muddle
Yeah,
through it,
It's
so.
just very helpful to have that in the motion, to be able to send that to the,
I appreciate that
Yeah.
on the other side. Absolutely.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Too many codes.
But you don't really have codes, it's not like.
Yeah,
municipal code section,
exactly.
it's the guidelines.
Like,
is
okay,
still
commercial code
No
is,
discussion in the audience at this time,
That's my public comment.
not open for public comment.
So item 2 has been postponed. Item 3 was on calendar for 4:25, so we're running a little bit ahead. And I'm going to ask that we have a quick break, and we be back here at 4:25 for that item. Okay? So we're going to adjourn until 4:25. Convene the Single Family Design Board meeting for February 13th, 2023. Next item on the agenda, item 2 is postponed, so the next item on the agenda is item 3, 3208 Laurel
Chair Kawas,
Canyon.
sorry for the interruption. Item 2 is postponed indefinitely at the applicant's request, but I just want to acknowledge we did receive one written correspondence on the item.
Okay,
So that was distributed prior to the hearing. Thank you.
thank you. So yes, moving on to item 3, 3208 Laurel Canyon Road. If we have an applicant or somebody here to represent the project, if they could come forward, please.
Okay, so we have your plans here queued up. I made a link to the website if you have time or want to explore that.
Okay.
If you have the old plans, so I'll just keep on the current drawings.
Okay.
And if you're also going to speak, just please be sure to press on the base of the mic to speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, so before the applicant presents the project, if we could have staff put up the meeting minutes from our last meeting. I think we ratified those today.
Chair Kawas, forgive me if I missed this, but did we read the project description into the record?
No, I'm happy to do that prior. So this is a proposal for, this project is here for project design approval today. And the proposal for additions to an existing one-story, 1,288 square foot single-unit residence comprised of a 214 square foot first floor addition and a new 784 square foot second floor addition. The project also includes an interior remodel, a new 200 square foot carport, a 345 square foot covered patio, a 106 square foot second story deck, removal of the existing concrete driveway and replacement with permeable paving systems, and associated mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades. The proposed project is a total of 2,727 square feet on a 6,970 square foot lot, and it amounts to approximately 93% of the maximum required floor-to-lot area ratio. The project is requesting, again, design approval, and neighborhood preservation findings are required. The project was last reviewed on January 17th of this year, so if we could bring up the meeting minutes from that, please.
Yes. Here are the meeting minutes. I'll read them into the record.
you.
Comment 1, provide an FAR study of the 10 immediate neighboring parcels consisting of at least 3 adjacent residences on either side of the proposed project and 7 residences located across the street from the proposed project. 2, restudy and consider minimizing the tower element or bringing this under the roof line of the second story. 3, provide a tree plan identifying sizes of existing and proposed trees. 4, provide additional exterior details to define the architectural style.
Okay. If you could please introduce yourself to the board and run us through your project and specifically focus on the items that were required of you in the meeting minutes, that would be great.
Yes, Joe Stewart with Studio 4 Design Group. Hello again.
Hello, Mr. Stewart.
So I zoomed in on the first comment, which was the FAR. So I provided a bunch of the FARs for the surrounding residences. And as you can see, there are 2 in the neighborhood that are actually larger than what we are proposing. So there's a 0.53. I'm not sure what that actually translates. This is the nearest 20 FAR that you guys had sent me. So I'm not sure what that translates to as far as versus our 93. So there's that. And I provided some details. We might as well just go with, so you also asked for the existing trees and proposed trees. So there's a new site plan, as you can see there, that shows the types of trees, where they would be located, and existing versus new.
Could you run us through those, please?
This could be a little bit. Okay, so, not exactly, I'm not gonna be able to read it and then show you which ones.
If you go to the website itself,
Oh, you think so?
it's much more legible.
Okay. Security warning? Allow. That's okay.
See. Oops. Oh, is this it?
That's the site.
This is the website, right?
Yep. Great,
So
thank
go
you.
to
Tree plan. Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself and then go through this? Because he actually produced this.
Sure. I'm John Goodman. I'm one of the owners, and I just put this together because it was requested after the last meeting. What you see in red are dying, old specimens that will be removed, and as well as structures that were put in illegally by a prior owner that will also be removed. The trees that are surrounded in yellow. Sorry. The trees that are surrounded in yellow are those that are existing and will remain. And if you scroll down, Joe, you can see a list. We have a bunch of citrus, effectively, as well as a old eucalyptus rubeta. Keep scrolling down, some pittosporum hedging, and a jacaranda right out by the tree, or by the street. Most of that is going to stay. The stuff that's being removed is relatively small. For instance, the 2 orange trees that are being removed are under, well, you can see they're, 4.5 feet tall. And we're going to remove that just to put in some other landscaping as opposed to just a row of trees. If you scroll down, these are the proposed modifications. You asked for some details on fencing on that eastern or western border because that's where the illegal structure is currently. And so we're at the very front going to install a 3-inch kind of traditional ranch style fencing and then go to 5 or 6 foot. As it goes backwards, there are photos below. And then if you scroll down further, these are the trees. These are the 2 options we're considering for screening the west rear fence to provide some privacy for our neighbors directly to the west. And Joe, I don't know if you want to, but if you scroll up to the top, go to comparisons, scroll down, keep going. These are all the FARs.
Yeah, this is right on the front sheet.
Is one of those the subject FAR?
Yes, the one that's highlighted.
This is us here.
Okay, great, thank you.
So then let's go back to. Now the only tab is this. Thank you. So then this is the sheets where we're showing the detailing, proposed detailing. So let me zoom in on those. So the brick detailing, like that. The entry canopy, obviously this would be with a standing seam roof, but the detailing, the wood detailing is what I think you were asking for. The wood-to-wood window detail. Rake detail with the outrigger. The canopies over the windows. Flashing roof-to-wall and ridge. So those are the details. As far as addressing the tower, we did not lower the tower. And the reason we did not lower the tower was not out of disrespect. Was we'd really like to get as much light into this stairwell as we can so that it goes, so we've got this tiny little window here on this elevation. And so if we lower it too much more, that one goes away. We would still have it on the other side. We'd still have windows on the other side. But that was the reasoning behind that. And the fact that it's stepped back on the back of the massing of the building in 3 dimensions, it's this is a higher version of it, but it'll be settled down in there a little bit more than these renderings show. So that was our idea behind that. So there's that window on the inside coming to give light into that stairwell. Do you want to talk about those heights?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to go back to
Yeah,
the
I'm going to go back
page.
to that. Oh,
Might still be open.
what do I have to do to get back to that website?
Click on the internet icon. Sorry.
No, it's me making you run around. Okay, great.
Go to click the address first, Joe.
Okay,
So that is an updated rendering with the tower set back and tucked in lower than the one that was on the set of plans. And you can see what it looks like literally tacked onto the roof to scale. If you scroll down, Joe, you can get clear views of it with and without the tree, but it does tuck back in there. Scroll down further. This was to point out that the single-story house that is 2 up from us is actually taller than the tower based on the grading of the street. It's more than a foot taller. And then if you scroll down further, you can see the other 2-story home heights on Laurel Canyon, both factoring for and without the grading to the building level. If you're factoring for the rise to the building level, 3208 as proposed would be the 3rd tallest on the street, not the tallest, and it's by several feet. You can, I'm not sure if you want me to answer any specific questions, but these were all just measured and pulled from archives to get the correct heights.
And just to point out, this is a full 2nd story at that 25 foot. This is a full 2nd story at the 23 feet versus the tower at 25.
Are there pictures down below that you want us to see?
Yeah, also 3208 is one of the few that has a negative grade. It's only 6 inches, but it's still a negative grade. So the appearance from the street is under 25 feet, certainly.
So the tower, is how it moves, it's just for money. We can't see.
Oh, we had a number of comments from neighbors that felt that it was a 3rd story. The windows are, I forget if they're 18 inches. They're literally just for light. There's no access to the tower. There's no observation deck up there. And, I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, but it's one of those things that you kind of have to live in a house before you understand some of its foibles. And the hallway that is directly below where that staircase is going to be is murky 100% of the time during the day. And so what we'd ideally like to do is get as much light into that stairway as possible to just make that hallway brighter, because it's also the hallway that goes to both of our, it ostensibly will go to both of our kids' rooms.
Is there anything else that you want to share with us, or anything that's changed since I'm sorry, is there anything else that you want to share with us as part of your presentation, or anything that has changed on the plans since we last saw them, aside from the items that you've pointed out?
No, nothing has changed except for what we've added as far as the detailing and the stuff you asked for.
Okay. Does that complete your presentation, or is there anything else
That's
you
all
want
I've
to
got.
share then? Okay. All right, thank you very much. So, at this time, we will open public comment for anybody who's interested in speaking on the project. Ms. Garson, would you like to man the helm?
Thanks, Chair Klas. So we will open public comment. For those attending on Zoom who wish to make oral public comment on this item, you can do so at this time by selecting the raise your hand icon. Once staff calls on you, you can unmute yourself. So while we're giving those on Zoom a chance to do that, I will just acknowledge that we did receive, it looks like 11 written correspondence. These were all distributed to the board members prior to the hearing. And also for those in the audience attending who wish to make public comment on this item, you can do so at this time. Please provide a speaker slip to the secretary, and we will call you up. First speaker we have is Mark Shatillo. Approach the podium, announce yourself. You'll have 2 minutes to speak, and please ensure that the green light is illuminated.
Thank you very much, staff, and I did, green light is illuminated now. It's really illuminated. It was lit up before, but now it's, thank you. I'm Mark Shatillo, and before I get started, Madam Chair, if I could ask the indulgence to allow myself 5 minutes if you could allow me 5 minutes to comment. I represent the immediate neighbor to the east, Anita Williamson, and she has submitted comments to your board both at the prior hearing and at this hearing, and we've submitted a letter in addition. I wanted to just go over a handful of issues and hopefully give you some thoughts from the perspective of the immediate adjacent neighbor.
I'm happy to give you 4 minutes, which is twice the normal allotment, but I'd ask you to hold it at that, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So my name is Mark Shatillo. I represent Anita Williamson. She is a longtime resident at 3210 Laurel Canyon Road. And our request to you today is that you hear the many public concerns and direct responsive revisions to the project. At the outreach stage, there's been limited opportunity for the community to be involved. The Good Neighbor Guidelines direct that applicants should first anticipate concerns from the most impacted and adjacent neighbors and then incorporate their suggestions. Unfortunately, as you've heard, there are many concerns for privacy, impacts to skylight and sunlight, and the size, bulk, and scale from the adjacent neighbors, but those have not been able to be incorporated within the project design. Your charge is to make findings of compatibility, and it's our belief that the compatibility findings cannot be made, and that the guidelines that control are very helpful in ensuring that the two key findings, one of neighborhood compatibility and the other is general compliance with the Good Neighbor Guidelines. So let me move in. The first item, we prepared a map that shows the surrounding neighbors that had expressed a concern, and I asked if the neighborhood Laurel Canyon Road there is highlighted exclusively. The property in red is the subject parcel. All of the yellow boxed parcels represent neighbors who have raised concerns and objections to the proposed project. And those objections are, as you've seen through the comments, largely privacy, incompatibility with surrounding homes, size, bulk, and scale. Next image, please, are the two-story design concepts. Those are,
Chair Kawas, can you flip to the next
no,
photo?
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
This is audience participation presentation. So old style, old school. That's where my come from. So the two-story design concepts there. This is out of our guidelines. You should avoid two-story homes. Require particular concern. Avoid a crowding and overwhelming neighbor properties. Avoid a vertical canyon effect between the homes. And as the wall height goes up, the space between the homes should increase. Maximize or minimize the use of maximum height, and 24, set back the taller portions of the structures from the lot lines to avoid the appearance of height. That next image is out of the, Madam Chair, the slide. So the top is from the guidelines, and it shows a second story that is drawn in. The bottom is a section from this project which shows that the vertical height goes up all the way at the footprint of the first story of the property. So it violates the cardinal goal of the guidelines to draw for second story homes, is to draw in the upper story in order to minimize the mass, bulk, and scale. And then the next slide, or the next picture there is the section of the property, and it shows, again, how much, yes, go ahead and pull that top one off, and I think that there's just one left, and that's it. That's the section of the property, or actually the south elevation, so from the backyard. Looking at it on the right is my client, Ms. Williams. Her house is not shown here, but if we could ask for the applicant's architect to pull up a picture of the east elevation, we could see the wall on that side and what it looks like from there. In conclusion, we're asking that your board direct the applicant to make significant revisions to the design in order to address both compatibility with the guidelines as well as to meet the needs of the community. Okay, that elevation, if we could pop that up before I lose my time, because I wanted to show the pinstripe effect. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see it's a two-story wall, and then there's the seamed roof on top that just creates a series of vertical lines as viewed from my client's property. Please, our request in summation, respond to the neighbors' concerns, or do a genuine FAR study, including Lucinda Lane, the properties that are not on Laurel Canyon, but are actually adjoining the property, as shown in that first photograph. Require story poles and a view study so that the privacy can be evaluated because of the two open areas. The balcony on the back looks out into my client's backyard and her bedroom, as well as with the other deck, and make the design changes of stepping back the upper elements, eliminate the tower, lower the first floor plate heights underneath the tall upper story sections to bring the whole mass down, and eliminate the balcony, which is facing onto the backyard. The guidelines say they should be facing towards the street.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair Kawas, the 4 minutes is up, so at your discretion.
And my last comment is on the there's a string line on the east side where the improvements actually extend further closer to the east side towards my client's property. If the string line was honored on that first floor, that would reduce the impact. So thank you very much for the additional time, and I very much appreciate your careful consideration.
You're welcome. Thank you. Turn it
Okay.
back to staff.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Gu, can you please check Zoom for raised hands?
Yes, we do have one raised hand for Eric Wessler. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear
Yes.
you. Please identify yourself, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
I'm Eric Wexler, and I reside at 3216 Laurel Canyon, a couple of houses east from 3208. I bought my home about 18 months ago. When I first saw the property, it was love at first sight. I appreciate the rural feel and how everything is spread out. It's quiet, and calm, and the structures mostly blend into the environment. Some of the houses are even hidden. But speaking up because I believe that the project as proposed is not compatible with our neighborhood. I'm especially concerned about the tower. I was relieved when the applicants were told at the last meeting to reduce its height by at least 18 inches, but apparently the applicants have decided not to do that. Our neighborhood is a very, very special place, and I really sympathize with those neighbors who would be impacted far more than I will be by this project. I had a 45-minute meeting with the applicant in my home that I thought was very cordial and logical, and I explained my concerns. I told him that, I could have just stayed quiet and let his project move forward because it would probably increase my property value as well. But I don't want to only see things from my own financial point of view. I care about my new neighbors, and I hope some of them will speak up for me one day if some future development threatens my property the way this project would impact them right now. I have requested story polls to help confirm or lessen any concerns about the project. I think we all need to see for ourselves in real life what this project would look like. Thank you.
Ms. Gu, do you see any other raised hands on Zoom?
At this time, I do not see any other raised hands on Zoom, so we are good.
Okay, seeing no further in-person public comment, we will close public comment. Back to you, Chair Kloss.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open the item to questions from the board. And again, I'm not going to go in any particular order, so if there's anybody that feels compelled to begin the questioning period, please feel free to jump in.
Chair Kloss, sorry to interrupt. I failed to mention this during the staff comment portion of this item. I just want to note that this project has been deemed complete from a planning processing standpoint, and we do need an action by February 27th to comply with Permit Streamline Act. So there is another SFDB hearing being held on 2/27, but just please keep that in mind during your question and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the board with questions. Anybody?
Could you review the balconies again and just walk us through the neighboring property lines and all the balconies in question?
Yes. So the balcony that they were just discussing is actually right above this space here. I'll show you the floor plan here in a second. And then the neighboring house is actually set back here. Let me go to the floor plan. This is the second floor deck here, and there is a second floor deck here. They are both relatively small. And the house, if you remember that site plan we were just looking at, is the corners right about back here. So you can see there's really, and of course you would be looking into their backyard a little bit, but currently they look into their backyard, so.
And then the other deck on the other property line, how close is that? How close is that to the property line on the other side?
Yeah, hang on. That is 7'6", approximately.
And can you approximately point out where the neighbor is?
Let's go back to the site plan. Come on. So that is right about here.
Got it. Thank you. That's my only question.
Yep. So 9 feet is what it is. Sorry, obviously the dimension on the floor plan was wrong.
That's actually something that we discussed with the neighbors directly to the west, and that's why we are planning on putting in 2 or 3 15 to 25 foot tall trees along that fence line, which is in the tree plan. And that's, we won't be able to see anything into their house, however, it does protect us from looking into their backyard,
Okay.
and vice versa.
Could we go to the tree plan really quick so I could see that?
Those are, these trees are the ones he's talking about right here.
And what type are they? It's kind of hard to see.
Hang on 1 second.
They're not, that's old, Joe.
Okay.
They are, I don't have internet, just a second.
Were these the olives or the magnolias
Yeah,
that you were
magnolias
proposing?
and olives, correct.
The 3 green.
Right, with the intention to purchase them at, fairly full scale.
And then the yellow, though, is really what's helping with the screening of the balcony. Is that correct?
The yellow is currently just 2 citrus trees, but effectively, the only way that you can look from that balcony into their backyard would be to look southwest. And so those trees with the green circles will do a lot more for privacy than anything else. The house screens the rest of it.
Yeah, that image is really clear. Thank you.
No questions on my end. Thanks.
No questions.
I got some questions. So you're over the 85%, which is discouraged. I mean, just generally, it's your job to convince us that you're compatible with your increased FAR. And neighborhood compatibility is probably our biggest issue, and the tower, we're all aware of. So I'm struggling when pictures are submitted like this impromptu and we don't have them prior. So I guess if you can go over your pictures again for neighborhood compatibility and heights, it's difficult to not have a diagram that's referenced with the properties, so I know which ones you're talking about. So if you have a diagram that shows the 10 closest sites, like I think you submitted last time, to say, okay, this is this one, and that's that one. And if you could show us where those 2 higher FARs, I know where they are, I think generally, but just confirm where those are in proximity to your residence.
One of them is the one directly next door to us.
3210, yeah, the 3810.
Okay,
And then
all right.
beyond that, it's 3 houses up the street.
Is there an aerial view of the neighborhood that we can look at? And I appreciate your situation, but if you're going to address the board, you need to come up, introduce yourself as part of the applicant team. And I understand what you're dealing with, but, yeah.
And I think on that same issue, as you present the pictures, was there a survey done of your finished floor elevations to, I mean, I appreciate all the work you've done with your approximations on elevations, but do you have a survey of your existing finished floor and/or any, or all of the diagrams with the approximations of heights? Approximations. If you could.
Just the diagrams we had shown earlier, so we can go back through those.
So if we can, maybe you can, I'm going to try to facilitate this a little bit. If we could keep what's on the screen right now on the screen, and then maybe have the FAR calcs that you did next to it, so that we could look at those side by side if there's a way to do that. And you can say, 3192 is here, it's a two-story, here's the FAR. I think that's what we're looking for, something
Okay.
similar.
Do you know what the largest FAR one? Do you know what that address is? Do you have that on your?
Yeah, it's 3226, that's a .53.
That's this one, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you can see it's that one. And then we can look at the pictures, but that's the biggest one from
Okay.
the street. And it's also up from the grade of the street level. And then 3210 is the adjacent one here, and that's the second largest one. And then we would be in third place. Strange way of putting that, but that's.
So 3210 is the neighbor that just had the public speaker.
Correct.
And that is the higher FAR. So can you show me the picture of 3210 then? If we're looking at compatibility is what I'm trying to figure out.
Right, it's more about the square footage because this is obviously not a two-story, but it's just, there's very little lot left.
You can click that circle.
There you go, yeah, perfect.
Nice work.
And then scroll down.
Okay, so there.
And there's that view right there. Would be worth clicking on, Joe, probably.
Okay, so the adjacent neighbor's FAR is larger but it's a single story, not a two-story.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, all right, that helps.
But it's also, their grade is, I believe, 8 feet taller than ours. I had drawn it in that section. So when you see the building section that I've drawn, that's actual height of their finished floor.
So when you say actual height, I would say that's a surveyor providing that finished floor.
I did measure it with a tape, but yes, I did
mean,
not. I
it's
did
an
not have a surveyor come
approximation,
out.
yeah, what you've presented, in my opinion.
Okay.
So the windows, can you go over what material you're using on the windows? Because I found like 3 different, from the details to the exterior elevations to a section, there's different window materials called out. So what is the window material? I don't know if you want to start at your window detail or your elevation.
No, the window detail was just really for what we're going to be doing at the exterior, not the actual material itself. The materials are on the material sheet.
Are they wood windows? Are they vinyl clad? Are they steel?
They're
Are they
steel.
aluminum?
They're steel.
Steel.
As soon as
and-
I can figure out how to
and-
get back to this.
And some wood.
There we go.
The ones that are facing effectively the sides of the house that don't make, those will be wood windows.
Okay, so what you're proposing then is steel on the front and wood windows, and they're all new?
I've been doing the same material all throughout.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, so they would be all the steel. Sorry. The mix up there.
And
This is all the material. So that's including the fences that we added. And then if we zoom in. These are the windows and doors, steel. And it's Portela, classic old world traditional steel black.
okay, but I'm struggling a bit because the window detail is not steel, it's wood. So I'm trying to figure out, at project design approval, it would be a complete set of details and documents that are the detail of steel. So do you want to go to the window detail? And
They are wood windows in the detail.
Yeah, okay.
I was just showing the concept for the surround for the window.
So what is presented to us is a wood detail, but you're going to do the trim that you show in the detail around the steel windows. You just didn't
No,
change
it's
out.
steel windows. Steel windows.
Maybe you should go to the detail.
I will do that. This one? So this is the trim, and it would just have the steel windows. So just forget this window right here. This is just how we would treat the exterior. So you'd have the steel windows in here.
Right, so you're showing a wood window in your detail, but you're going with steel, and they're going to be cased out with wood.
That is correct. I was just showing you an example of what we were doing for the details, and mostly this was for, I thought you guys were looking more for this type of detailing for the exterior and the canopy.
So as I recall, the direction at the last meeting, Ms. Anderson, was that we were looking for some details to understand better whether the architectural intent here was a cottage style or a craftsman style. So we were looking for member sizes and associated detailing, and I think the this roof at entry begins to speak to that, because we're seeing, a larger heavy post, we're seeing a 4x6 rafter, so I think that's beginning to do that. I think Ms. Anderson's concern is, does it make sense to have the metal with the wood casing? How are those actually interfacing from an architectural standpoint? So to say we're just going to swap this out is, of course, we all know that architecturally it's not that simple, right? Is it going to be curve cut? Is it going to lap over? Is it going to lap under? So those are, I think, the points that maybe Ms. Anderson is driving at.
Sure.
It's not as easy as just saying we're going to skip that. So, but what I'm gleaning, and I'll try to paraphrase here, is that you are proposing a steel window, and it would have a cased surround on the face of the wall
Correct, wood.
with a wood return back to the frame, and it would have a wood stool on it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Does that help?
Yeah, well, it doesn't, I mean, I was just also trying to get to what are we proposing, because in my mind, it's not necessarily accurate.
That is true. That is true. It's,
Thank
what
you.
level of
And through
approval
that-
are we actually going for here?
Well,
'Cause
I
I
thought,
haven't
thought
heard
we're
any
design.
approval at any level yet, so typically I don't get these details cross-referenced on my plans until at least preliminary.
So this is, you are agendized for project design
Project design
approval, which is the
approval.
equivalent of preliminary
Okay.
at the city. Preliminary would be through the county typically. So that is the level you're agendized for
Okay.
today. And final approval is usually once all the consultants' drawings are on
Yep.
board and you've synced all of those. So that's why Ms. Anderson is asking for that.
Understood. I just was under the impression we were still looking at concept, because nobody ever said we were approved for anything.
Right, so we received clarification from staff today that we don't in fact give a conceptual approval, we just give comments at the conceptual stage.
Okay.
So that's what we did at our last hearing, and then we moved you forward for project design review at the
yeah.
subsequent hearing,
Okay,
which is what you're agendized for today. Okay.
Okay.
So now that we're clear on that, so it sounds like there's a bit of a disconnect between the applicant and where we're at. So it may be that we want to continue to look at bigger picture items here, maybe relative to neighbors' concerns, and do we feel like we're at a point that we're still feeling comfortable with where the project is at, relative to size, bulk, and scale? And then consider whether we can give an approval today for PDA or whether we're pushing that off to, I guess it would be the next hearing, and that would be and/or for, it would be PDA and/or final, depending upon where the project comes back.
Okay. So the first floor is, the plate height is 10 foot. Can you confirm that?
That is not 10 feet.
Okay.
Let's go to the section. Sorry, we are on this side at 10 feet. The rest of the house is at 8 feet. So yes, you are correct. Here at 10 feet we are, and that's because we're trying to get a little bit more volume into this covered patio, but the rest of the house is 8. So it's really just this area that's this two-story element, which is why we step down here as we go out from the bedroom, down into the guest bedroom, and then down the stairs. Otherwise, we would have a really dark space in this covered patio.
So on the westerly side, you have a 10-foot floor, finished floor. It's actually 10 foot, and whatever your interstitial space is your floor to
The
floor.
east side?
Is that your?
This is the
I'm
east
trying to
side.
That's
orient
the
myself.
east
Sorry, this is the
side,
east, and
yeah.
then this is the neighbor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just do 10.
Yes, I'm sorry, the east side. And what is the approximate grade difference there from finished grade?
Shows 6 to this, so this is probably, to this point here, I think I measured it to 4 feet, and then where it hits the house is probably at 5, and then their finished floor is up here a little bit.
Do we have a survey on the property?
We do not have a survey.
Okay.
Okay, and the brick is a whitewash brick?
That
you're-
is what we're proposing now,
Okay,
yes.
and then back to the tower, and I believe our comment was consider, bringing that under the roof line as an option. Did you consider, linear windows as well, or skylights to bring down the tower, since it's a sensitive, the design is very nice, don't get me wrong. I think it's a total enhancement of the neighborhood, for sure. It's super.
I think the horizontal window would not really work with this. It would almost be better just not to have that upper window. It just wouldn't read with anything else that's going on, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those
We
are my-
did consider it, and we did bring it down from that original sketch, which you had seen. So we did bring it down. We didn't bring it down since the last meeting. I don't mean to say that. But the reason that we didn't was because of this window and getting the light in like we had said. So that's where we stand right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask a couple general questions of the board here to try to move us forward. Do we feel like we have enough information to make a determination on neighborhood compatibility? That's the big question. Do we have enough FAR information, height information, et cetera?
Chair Colossus, during my comments, I was going to ask the board if for a discussion or a straw vote on whether whether everyone thinks the FAR is acceptable based on the information provided, and also whether the board believes the tower should remain. So I was, for straw votes of that.
How large is the lot? 6,900 and, so this is a required, it's not a guideline FAR, right?
Chair Colossus, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's talk about the tower. Who feels like the tower is an acceptable element? We won't talk about the height of it, but just who feels like the tower is an acceptable element? Can we take a quick vote on that, straw vote? Katie, Ms. Klein, do you have any concerns with the tower?
I think that it does feel large, but it's not providing any privacy issues. So I don't see it as a problem with privacy. But scale-wise, it does feel a bit large.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
Well, I was hoping that it would have been reduced from our previous submittal. I'm concerned about Lucinda neighbors down below. With the height of it, I think generally it's an interesting element. I'm not sure, but it's not my decision on cost of what you're going to get for providing light into the stair. But I think, aesthetically with the style of the house that it fits in. So did I answer the question right? Am I in support of it as is? Are we at that?
I think, yeah, it sounds like you're okay with it, but you'd like to see it come down slightly. Okay, and Ms. Gerfaldi?
Yeah, similar perspective in support of it. I think it definitely adds to the just overall style and beauty of the home, but I just wish it could be a little bit shorter. I don't know if you could do more of a vertical window just on one side or just something to, you know, do so just a little
Drop that
bit.
first floor plate. That east side is a concern. You got it at 10 feet.
I think part of that was being driven by how it connects to the one room they're trying to save, if I recall. I think that's part of what's driving.
That's-
Or is that part of what's driving that 10
That's the
foot?
location of it on the site, because we're trying to keep that volume in that living room. That plate is due to, as I was saying in this section, this space here, you see how we're coffering that ceiling a little bit? That just raises this up, because otherwise it's a deep space, and I will show you in the floor plan. Because that's above this space, this patio, covered patio. So if that's scrunched down to 8 feet, then it feels like it's going to be too deep and dark.
Can we see the second floor again, please? So the second floor is stacked really only over that deck and everything?
That deck is in here underneath.
So there is opportunity to lower the plate there.
We could.
Okay. Okay. And then you had a second question, I'm sorry, that you were going to put to straw vote. It was,
I had a comment about the tower for the discussion.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Given the location of the tower, it's pretty far back from street view of Laurel Canyon. Despite that, and after looking at the neighborhood in terms of compatibility, if the tower cannot be reduced, I would request for it to be removed. But I would request for it to be reduced.
Okay. Okay. How about FARs? How's the board feeling about FARs right now? Do we feel like we have enough information to weigh in on FARs? Or do we feel like we need a broader study?
I don't need a broader study.
Okay.
I believe, I'm aware for the cover sheet, it's a required FAR area. I appreciate the applicant providing all this additional information, but, the project came in initially at 87%, and the applicant explained, with much reason why they are seeking 93%. But given the other lots and their nature, where many of them are single story, aside from some outliers, I would request an FAR reduction.
Do you have a target that you'd be looking for?
So the applicant before came at 87% in the required FAR area, and I'm trying to do my best to make it workable with the client. I believe below 90% would be more supportable. But thanks for asking that.
Do any other board members have any thoughts on that? Ms. Klein?
I would agree with that. Yeah, even closer to the 85. I don't know if you've gone through the scrunching of the inches, but I'm continually doing that on my projects.
Ms. Klein?
Yeah, I think 90 would feel okay to me, just if I had to throw a number at it, 90 and below.
Okay. And then this is another question for the applicant. So in my recollection is in driving this neighborhood that there are a couple homes beyond this one that are two-story, but immediately, and based on the aerial, they're mostly single-story, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Three.
There's three.
There's three?
There's three two-stories, yes.
Yeah, I know. As you're going up the street, there's two on the same
three,
street.
three two-stories on the south side. The
Okay.
north side has several, but you can't, they're in the ravine.
Okay. Oh, they're down, okay. And Ms. Klein, you were asking about the decks. I'm assuming you were asking that question relative to privacy. Do you have any concerns about the locations of the decks or relationship to the neighboring parcels based on the responses that you received from the applicant?
I think there's sufficient screening. And it was in regards to privacy, and I think that I'm not concerned.
Okay. Does anybody else on the board have any concerns about the locations of the decks? The one deck is 9 feet away from the property line, so it is closer than typical guideline, but the southerly one is not.
What's the square footage on it?
It's relatively small.
It is pretty small.
Well, has the west neighbor commented on that deck? I mean, the west neighbor hasn't really been involved. Yeah.
It's less than 50.
The west neighbor came and met with us, said they were in full support, had nothing to worry about. And then subsequently, our neighbor at the east has gone door to door effectively trying to garner support. And subsequently, the neighbor to the west brought that up. However, it's in relation to privacy. Based on the location of the corner of the house, that deck it'll look at trees solely. We won't be able to see anything.
Their backyard.
Right.
In their house.
Or their roof, but not anything in the house. And in fact, part of the reason that we added the tower was to unify the two structures on the second story, which also was in part to help the western neighbor not be concerned about privacy of a structure further towards the street on the second story, looking into bedrooms. And they appreciated that. And the tower, in terms of just while I have it, light is important, but the main thing, I think, is, does it look right? Is the proportion of the height to the ceilings? You know, when you stand and look at it from the street, we want it to be as visually appealing as possible. So, you know, if we can play with that, we can certainly try. But it's a question more of the, you know, if you've got a little nub of a tower, does it actually fulfill the same goals? I'm not sure. I'm not the expert on that.
What is the FAR of the westerly neighbor? That's a single-story structure to the west.
Do you have, yeah, it's a 0.28.
And then there's that other three-story is next to them. Or sorry, two-story is next to them.
Okay, does anybody have any more comments or questions? Questions for the applicants or discussion amongst ourselves?
I just had one more comment about the fencing. I guess a question too. What is the material of the fencing and location?
So essentially out front here, but then we're removing this, this storage, that's just storage right there. So we're removing that, it's not permitted. So is this where you have those? Yeah.
And the fencing at the back of the western border is falling apart. It's old and under vine, and so we need to replace all of it. The intention was to make something look effectively like wood, but maybe not have to repaint or redo it every, 7 years as opposed to, and I've seen this in person, and it seems to fit the bill, especially if it's painted in a trim color.
I think that was my color, or my question is the color. It was like black in the other picture.
We'll be matching it to trim.
So that color, darker.
Right.
So my comment would be to go maybe something lighter for heat purposes, to study that.
Okay, so just a couple of thoughts that I have. I think the project is very, and I'm speaking for myself and not for the board here, I think it's very close to being able to give project design approval to. I do think there are some concessions that we could ask or direct you to implement that would help to resolve some of the issues for the neighbors. I personally am a little bit concerned that we do not have a survey. I feel like there's a little conversation going on where it's like, well, we think it's about a 5-foot grade difference. We don't have a specific, ridge number for certain things. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable from a board perspective, giving a project design approval just because I feel like I'm basing it on information that is not guaranteed accurate. And, given the level of interest of the neighbors, I think it's important that we have that. That creates a timing concern, given where we're about to time out. And I don't know how quickly you could get somebody out there to survey this. But it is a concern of mine because I just don't know that we're basing decisions on reality as opposed to guesswork, frankly. So those are those are some kind of big overarching concerns that I have. I could attempt to table a motion, but if anybody else would like to do that, I'd be happy to have somebody else do so. And
I can give it a try and see, go from there.
Board Member Arkillian, just for your consideration in the motion, I would suggest we continue this item to date certain of 2/27 so the applicants can, take into consideration your comments and how they'd like to move forward.
okay.
Would like to move for this project to return to the full board on date certain of February 27th with the following comments. The applicant shall reduce the FAR to 90% or less. The applicant shall reduce the height of the tower element. For the applicant to use a neutral or earth color at the perimeter fencing that is lighter in tone than the building's trim color. And
I just have a clarifying question on that. So the fencing is to be lighter than the trim, or is it, okay.
I would like to ask like to ask for the applicant to bring back a survey. I'm not sure if that's enough time. No. So I'll leave that out. That's all I have for now.
I'll second that. And I'd like to add that the applicant shall reduce the plate height at the easterly, I guess that's the second floor, to the lowest height possible, roughly 8 feet at the rear. And that that plantings be clarified that would be on the westerly property line, providing screening for the small, less than 50-foot square foot deck on the second floor.
I'm in support of that. Yes.
Are there any other additions or amendments to the motion that is on the table?
Just that the 90% FAR be considered, of course, with the east and the west neighbor in utmost important to step back or reduce the scale for those two adjacent neighbors.
Okay, so maybe the language would be that, well, I'll let you try to put language around that. It's your motion, Mr. Arakelian.
So to clarify on that line, for the applicant shall reduce the FAR to 90% or less, and then adding on to that statement, considering, particularly considering the east and west, a reduction in respect to the east and west neighbors.
So let us make our motion, and then we can provide you with a clarification if need be. So the reduction in square footage is most desirable on the east and west sides on the second floor. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, and then I'm going to re-second that. And if we can have a roll call, please.
Here we go. Chair Kalaz?
Yes.
Okay. Vice Chair Arkalian?
Yes.
Board Member Klein?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
And Board Member Grafani?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the fourth and final item, 3525 Campanile Drive. And we'd like to thank the applicants for their patience while we worked through the last item. You're welcome to approach while she's getting things up and running here. Yeah. I was holding on to them in case we needed them again, but there you go. Yeah.
It's touchscreen. You can also use the earlier plans and this text. Also, just make sure the green light is illuminated, speak into the mic. Switch to my screen.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read this into the record, and then I'll ask you to introduce yourselves and your project. So this is a new project before us, I believe, at 3525 Campanile Hill, or Campanile Drive. It's before us for concept review today. This is a proposal to construct additions to an existing 2,277 square foot one-story, single-unit residence consisting of a 480-square-foot residential addition and a 162-square-foot addition to the existing attached garage. The project also includes new doors, windows, roofing, 2 guest parking spaces, a driveway gate, pergola, outdoor barbecue, and a garden wall. The proposed total of 3,488 square feet of development on a 75,929 square foot, i.e. 1.74 acre parcel, is 64% of the maximum guideline floor to lot area ratio. We are not able to make an appealable decision at this time. Neighborhood preservation findings and hillside design district and slope lot findings will all be required when the project is reviewed for project design approval. I'd like to introduce yourselves, present your project. You have 15 minutes to do so.
Great.
Okay.
Hi there. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Jacob Nixto with Becker Hinson Nixto Architects.
My name is Morgan Solorio with Becker Henson Nixo Architects.
And we do have our landscape architect, Jessica Harlan, who was not able to make it. She was considering that we were going to be Zoom, so we had a little misunderstanding there. But she's watching via Zoom, should we have any specific questions in that regard. So we're here tonight for some minor additions to an existing single-family residence. This is up on kind of the back of Campanile Drive, looking north back towards the city. So the street here on the south side, and then these contour lines are all heading down as you go north, looking back towards the city. So take a brief look through the photos. It's an existing mid-60s ranch house, kind of sprawling with many angles. There's quite a few of these porches that I'll show you. We're going to be infilling these porches to kind of stay beneath the roof line in certain areas. A couple areas will be expanding outside of that roof line, but I can show you that when we get to the plans. Kind of streetscape. There's currently hedges out front. A lot of privacy in the neighborhood, some low walls that are relevant when we get there as well. So the first thing is we're wanting to transform this kind of mid-60s ranch into more of a traditional Spanish style. So that's kind of the big overall push. We'd also like to address the street presence of this project. As kind of shown in the photos, right now it's a big hedge along the front. We're actually proposing to take down the hedge and replace that with more of a low wall and some plantings to actually open up a little bit, not be so much of a fortress. Add a pedestrian gate, kind of a more traditional entry to the front door as opposed to walking down the driveway and then making your way there. And then also adding a vehicular gate at the driveway as well, both of those to be wrought iron. The driveway itself currently, and I'll move on to the next slide, kind of best illustrates this. On the left is the current driveway. It makes a very hard button hook to actually get into the garage. It's, maybe a 17-point turn or something to get it in and out of there. So we're proposing to reorient the garage door, move the garage door to more of the southerly wall, and move. There's a slight hill sloping downhill. Put it may be 4 or 5 feet by the time we get into it, but a little retaining wall there to get a little more maneuvering area, so it's not quite this narrow driveway, and add some guest parking there. So I'll pop back to the full site plan, but that's one of our primary moves. If I can zoom in here, there's we've got, I think, 5 addition areas going on here, and 3 of them, this one on the upper right, this one in the middle, and this one here, are proposed to be under the existing roof line, so they're infill of porch areas. And then a small addition out here to provide a little more space for the primary bathroom, and a small addition out here for a little kind of workshop off the garage. Again, the house itself is about 7 or 8 feet down from the street level. We are proposing to raise this area here of the roof massing at the entry to kind of provide that traditional Spanish, build up most importance at the entry, and then it kind of works its way down, down in the wings without going to a full second floor. So there is existing screening. I'm going to zoom out here. To the west, there's a hedge, a nice established hedge for this neighbor to the west, to minimize whatever small impact this addition would have. And again, it's below grade there. So let's see, I think there's a photo of this in here that was important. This here, kind of the driveway's here. There's a fence and a hedge for the neighbors on the other side. To the east, there's really not much of a impact to the neighbors' structures. They're far north. Their driveway kind of comes down, goes so far we couldn't fit it all on the page, and winds over here. So it's more kind of landscape and property in this area for our small additions here. John and Kathy, the owners, have reached out to the neighbors. They've gotten in contact with some of them who've been in support, have not had a chance to connect with all the neighbors. But they've also, there is an HOA, Campanile HOA, and they've gotten positive feedback from them on this project as well. So I'll quickly then move through sound. We comply with the 53 decibels at property line, well under that with heat pumps that are 25-ish feet away from the property lines there. Here's our existing and proposed. We're proposing to kind of move an entryway here rather than come straight down the middle. A little bit, it's a long, narrow bedroom, gather some of that porch space. Do something similar over here on the west end, gather some of the porch space there, reconfigure the garage as noted. And I'd be happy to add a pergola. The pergola, as discussed, out back, kind of with the views to the north. They sweep from the northwest to the northeast. So I'd be happy to answer any further questions if there's specifics on what's happening inside. But again, kind of the roof plan diagram, the existing roof on the north, the proposed roof on the south, cutting off the eaves a little bit to kind of get more of a traditional plastered eave rather than a extended ranch eave. And then the dark areas are new roofs, the light areas are infill underneath the porches. Again, here's our series of elevations with the existing elevations on top. So the existing south, and of course these are all skewed a little bit. This is one of those angular specials. So we have different unfoldings here, but trying to create a little, just a slight raise here to signify here's the important entry, kind of a more traditional plaster surround, come in there, and still allow for a lot of natural light in both ends of this longer living dining room, combined room. The proposed driveway gate, the proposed person gate, we're just here for comments, so we're not quite at lighting, but some kind of night sky compliant lighting out there. And again, reconfiguring the garage door. And so, let's see, forgive me. This would be Jessica Harlan's landscape plan, and she is available via Zoom, but asked that I read just a quick synopsis. The streetscape will have a new site wall and a palette of ornamental mat rush marked by sculptural agave, create a low water use all-season streetscape that maintains line of sight from the driveway. And 2 multi-trunk marina trees will flank the new driveway gates to mark the entry, and they're located outside of the visibility triangles. As we discussed, the driveway has been broadened to accommodate vehicular access. There's a couple existing olive trees right here near the front, these 2 circles that we are specifically aiming to maintain and protect. Underplanting along the driveway is, again, low water use and a mix of Mediterranean plantings and succulents. The entry, a more defined entry from the street, create a sense of arrival and take advantage of the existing trees. There's a few large sycamore trees kind of here and here. And work with, let's see, what used to be lawn has been eliminated, and there's a citrus alley kind of from this here. So we're reducing the lawn area here. There's a small gravel patio out here off the primary bedroom, again, with not much impact to the neighbors there. And then in the backyard, new patios connect the home with the existing pool and site features to create an expanded outdoor living space. Small gas fire pit and barbecue area are included. And then overall in this area, the lawn has decreased. Currently, it's lawn just about all the way around this back area here. So the lawn has decreased, and low water use and firewise plantings are used to create a framework in the backyard. And then a small vegetable garden here, and likely where we will be anticipating our stormwater collection, Tier 3, I believe will be in the Tier 3 zone. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, so Ms. Garson, we'll go ahead and open up public comment.
Ms. Gu, can you please switch to my screen? We did not receive any written correspondence on this item. And for those attending on Zoom who wish to make oral public comment on this item, you can do so now by selecting the raise your hand icon. Staff will call on you and you can unmute yourself. And I'm not seeing anyone in the audience wishing to make public comment on this item. Ms. Gu, do you see any raised hands?
At this time, I do not see any raised hands for this particular item. Thank you.
Okay, that would close public comment. Back to you, Chair Colossus.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just open it up for the board. Anybody who has any questions for the applicants?
I do, since you're on landscape, if you could just zoom in to the hardscape. I just want to see the materials really quick for the hardscape. So the site walls are concrete poured in place, is that?
Yeah, I think either to be concrete or plastered CMU. Likely, either way, we'll have a plaster finish over them.
Those were my only questions. Thank you.
I wanted to ask staff, it wasn't clear to me, maybe I missed it, but what triggered this project to come to the full board?
Thank you for the question. It would be the square footage, the additions. That was the design review trigger.
Okay, thank you.
Was that your only question?
That's all I have, yeah.
Okay. Can we just take a quick look at the exterior elevations again, please? Sure. Okay. Any questions?
I do, of course I do. Thank you for your submittal. It's like nice in the end. In your presentation. So the plan is to keep all the existing roof framing except for that entry section where you're bumping it up, and the plate heights then are remaining the same, or are you adding on to the height?
Yeah, that's correct. The plate heights, which I believe are in the ballpark of 8 feet plate heights, will remain the same. We, aside from the entry massing here, we are planning to probably vault some of the interior spaces to gather some additional space in that regard.
Of course, yes. All right. But the exterior walls are existing besides your infill areas. I mean, I was a little bit confused on the floor plan. It looked like most of the walls were looking like they were shaded, which were new, but I'm like, no, they're not doing that.
We are thickening the walls, so that's why they show as pochade there.
Right. Yes. Thank you. So we talked about okay, all right. Pergola is coming. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you're setting the gate back enough to get the vehicle off the road. Those are my only questions.
Questions? Okay. Can take a look at the front elevation just one more time. I'm looking at the chimneys as it relates to your entry, and there's something I like about the big, fat, thick existing chimney, but it is very 60s, 70s. I totally get that. I don't really have any questions. I'm just kind of gawking at it. Does anybody have any comments?
I do. I actually have one more question before I dive into it. I'm looking at the landscaping plan. Is there any fencing between the neighbors that is to remain or to change?
Yes, there is. I believe it's actually for the most part chain link fence, and it likes to wander. So currently there is a chain link fence here, and then it wanders. This is actually the fence line right there that wanders onto the neighbor's property and then back onto Kathy and John's property. I'm not good at touchscreens. Good old mouse. So that will remain, and then as shown in the photograph, there is this kind of X line here. It jogs in, and that fence will remain there as well. So
That's also chain link?
I believe it is, yes.
Do you happen to have the color of those?
It's
Looks
that right there. It's kind of embedded in hedges and plantings. I don't know the color off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. So my comments are, I believe quality architectural materials are being used. Believe it's there's a lot of authentic elements that are being proposed for this new Mediterranean style. I believe the project is ready to move forward to the consent calendar for future for the next hearing, depending on what the other comments are. And also the fence, that chain link fence color, I would just want to confirm if it's black or an earth tone, or if it's to remain. That's it. Thank you.
Ms. Klein, do you have any comments?
Just that I think it's a nice, pretty straightforward project, and I think it's only here for conceptual, really. But positive comments, I think it could even go back to consent.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Graffitti?
Yep, agree. Just overall think it's a great project and enhancement of the current home.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, it definitely will enhance the neighborhood. Looking forward to colors, materials, perspectives, if you so choose, and your developed Spanish Mission or Mediterranean style details, whatever you're going for. Thank you.
Yeah, I concur with the rest of the board. I think it's a fairly straightforward project. I don't see any major impacts to neighbors. You're basically maintaining what I'll call is an aerial footprint of the building. I think, like any project, the success will be in the detailing and the color palette, and I'm assuming that we'll be seeing a two-piece mission tile roof, maybe with some bolstering, when you come back with your color palette, I would give some real consideration to what color you decide to make the site wall. You are in a hillside district, so in some regards, it would be great to see a neutral wall there that kind of goes away, and yet this is a traditional Mediterranean home, and historically we would see a white, smooth, troweled plaster wall, so I think that could also work. So I think it could go either way, but I would think on it. I think it's generally yeah, I agree. I think it's an enhancement to the neighborhood, and it's nice and refreshing to see a mid-century house being turned into something that feels Spanish Mediterranean as opposed to the other way around. It's actually like I'm kind of really excited about this project. If I had been getting out of college 30 years ago or 40 years ago, I wouldn't be excited about this project, but now I am. So does anybody want to make a motion? So we're not actually, we're just making comments and moving this forward, and
I'll make a motion for the project to be continued indefinitely to consent for project design approval and final with the following comments: that the project is compatible in size, bulk, and scale. Quality architectural materials are being used. There's no privacy issues. They followed the good neighbor guidelines, and the landscaping is a big enhancement to the property as well.
and I'll second that. And I'll just acknowledge, I know, Mr. Arakilan, you had a concern about the color of the chain link fencing. I think that for the most part, because of the way that wanders through the landscape, that it probably just kind of goes away.
I asked the question because the applicant presented, the front hedge, the front screening will be removed, and from street view, it's going to be pretty visible. So I'm not sure how visible it's going to be based on my current interpretation, but I just wanted to play it safe.
Okay, so I would ask the maker of the motion if we can add a comment that where hedges are being removed in the front yard, that the applicants address any remaining fencing and whether it will be removed in subsequent submittals.
I accept.
So we have a motion on the table. Could we take roll call, please?
Here we go. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Arkalian,
Yes.
Board Member Klein,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
and Board Member Garfeiti.
Yes.
Motion passes for continuance to consent review. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that will conclude the Single Family Design Board meeting for February 13th, 2023. The meeting is officially adjourned. Have a good evening and a happy Valentine's Day.